Hello, everyone, and welcome back to College Football Corner. Kevin Walsh alongside Joe Archino. As always, going to break down all of the good stuff the college football world has given us. We've got our Final Four: Bama, Clemson at 2, Ohio State at 3, and then Washington being the final team. Michigan, Penn State, they miss out. Did the committee get this one right?
I mean, look, the committee's job is very clear. Give us the best 4 teams in college football, and most certainly that's what they have done. And I applaud them because it's not an easy decision. It never is. You're always going to have people who disagree with what you decide, but I think largely they have gotten it right these past 3 years, and I honestly have no complaints. I think the order, the rankings of them, we know Alabama is probably going to be far and alone the odd-on favorite at this point out, and they largely should be based on their track record.
It's so tough for me. Each year, I feel like you really could have a big problem with the 4. But I don't know how much I blame the committee. I think the expansion is needed, something that we're going to touch on a little bit later. But let's break down these games that we've had. We're going to get right into our picks. 1, Alabama, by far and away the best team in the country, truly deserving of a number 1 spot, goes up against Washington at 4. Who do you have?
See, I think on its face, everyone is going with Alabama in this game, and I am as well. No one is not going to pick Alabama. But the interesting thing about this game is the 2 coaches at the head of both these programs, Chris Peterson at Washington and Nick Saban at Alabama, both are masters at the waiting game. When you give both these coaches times, they roll out new things. And Chris Peterson especially, which has a very dynamic offense behind a very dynamic quarterback, I think when you look at him and what he's been able to do historically, he's going to bring a lot of new plays out. And Alabama's going to be shown a lot of things they haven't seen before. Now, Alabama is always prepared and always be ready to handle those things, but I do think that's a notion that could make it interesting. But Alabama is just far and alone better than everyone else. Their run defense is unstoppable. They defend the pass a little bit better than they did last season, although that's still a little bit of their weakness. And offensively, they do enough to win. And I think when it comes down to all those things, the Alabama formula to win is tied, and it's true, and it will help them win once again.
I think you make a terrific point. Their secondary can be somewhat suspect, but the pass rush that they have with Allen and Williams, it makes it nearly impossible to get your quarterback time. Jake Browning has been terrific this year for Washington, should be one of the final 3 Heisman candidates, but I just don't know if he'll have enough time. Washington is going to be very exciting for me next year. I don't think that we anticipated this much success for them. They're a very, very young team. I look forward to their season next year. They're just coming up against an absolute juggernaut. I don't think they're going to be experienced enough. Also, you've mentioned it a lot. When Nick Saban has extra prep time, nearly impossible to beat, I think Bama will get the first-round victory and be in the college football playoffs once again in the final. Now, the other matchup, 2-3, Clemson, Ohio State. Really exciting. JT Barrett versus Deshaun Watson. This looks like a great game. Who do you see coming out with a win?
You know, it's a battle of the offenses, and this is a really close-cut game. And I think, obviously, Deshaun Watson going up against J.T. Barrett is really a dream matchup that we all have been wanting to see. And I think the only thing that helps me make this pick is the head coaches here. And I think, obviously, Dabo Swinney is great, what he's been able to do with that program. But like I've said and reiterated on this show, I just think at Clemson, something has been missing for them this year, especially on offense, where last year they were ranked number 2 in total offense the entire year. And then this year they failed to crack the top 10 consistently. And Urban Meyer, on the other hand, you know, historically, he's not a guy you want to pick against when it comes down to it. But Ohio State has struggled at the later portion of their season. They've been winning. It hasn't been the most convincing ways, but you give me Urban Meyer and you give me a big, strong-arm quarterback in J.T. Barrett, even though Ohio State is very, very young and they've really shown the youth this year, I think with the combination of head coach and quarterback, they win against Clemson.
This game's very exciting, but I'm going to go with Clemson. For me, and this is hard to give a team a pass for this, but I feel like almost like Clemson has been looking forward to the playoffs since the end of last season. Interesting, after they won the ACC championship, Dabo Swinney spoke to a reporter and said, I'm really excited to see who we get in the college football playoff. The teams weren't selected, and you could make a real case for them to be left out. There was no doubt in their mind. I think this is where their focus has been all year. Deshaun Watson has the potential to be one of the greatest college football quarterbacks we've seen in recent memory, along the ilks of Cam Newton and Tim Tebow. It's going to take a terrific postseason for him to do that. I think he has a bit of a chance. I just feel like Clemson, they're there. I feel like there could be some serious magic for them. I think that they're going to upset the Buckeyes. We're going to look at some of the other big bowl games. The Rose Bowl certainly jumps out. Penn State against USC. Penn State probably the team that feels the most hard done by being left out. Are they going to come out with some vengeance up against USC and trounce the Trojans?
Well, I think both these teams undeniably probably have two of the hottest hands in college football right now. I mean, USC, they struggled early in the season, very similar to Penn State, where they struggled early on. And lately, I mean, they have been playing on a different level. Penn State, I think you just saw the way that they responded in the Big Ten championship game against Wisconsin, rallying from being down big and just the fire that they show. It's something incredible, but to me, USC is just one of those teams where I just have liked their organization a little bit more than Penn State. And I do think that USC has really shown a force to be reckoned with this later stage of the season. I think it's very tough. Both teams obviously have a lot of momentum. But I'm going to go with the USC here. It's the Rose Bowl. It's a place where they have done a lot of things historically. I have them winning this game.
It should be a really good one. You mentioned the streaks that these two teams are on are terrific. I look back to the very first year that we had the Final Four system in play. TCU was the team a lot of people felt robbed. Their bowl game against Ole Miss, they absolutely destroyed them, almost sent a message to the committee saying we should have been in. Funny enough, the team that got the 4 spots was Ohio State. They won the championship, so it's hard to make that case. I think Penn State may do something similar where they go out and they know that they, in a way, still have something to prove since they missed out on a Final Four spot. I think their passion for this game, I think it's going to mean a little bit more to them, and I think that's what will separate these two teams. I like Penn State here. Now, the Sugar Bowl is another fun game. It's Auburn against Oklahoma. Two teams in the very early going within the first 3 weeks. We both looked at one another and said, they're done, get them out. Really strong second half of the year for both programs, who closes out with a W.
Well, you and I, obviously, again, we really still never bought into this Oklahoma program the last 2 seasons. And I think Auburn, obviously, their defense this is probably the best defense Gus Malzahn has had during his time at Auburn. But while he has the best defense he's had at Auburn, I do think this is probably the weakest offense he's ever had at Auburn. And because of the uncertainty at quarterback right now heading into this bowl game, I have to give a little bit of an edge to Oklahoma to win this game. I don't like picking against Auburn because I do think they're bred better than Oklahoma is playing in the SEC. But with the quarterback play behind Baker Mayfield and with the uncertainty there for Auburn, to me, I think you just have to swing this in Oklahoma's direction.
I tend to agree with you. It's funny enough, we've now been doing this show for a couple of years, and you kind of get your staples. You know, your thing is, I trust Urban Meyer, I trust Nick Saban. Marcus Mariota is the greatest of all time. For me, 2 of my big things are Oklahoma isn't legit, and the SEC is nowhere near as deep as people like to say it is. Well, these two evils meet, and I'm going to pick Oklahoma to prevail. Their end of the season run, honestly, and it's crazy for me to even say this, they had consideration for a Final Four spot. Baker Mayfield is a legit Heisman candidate. D.D. Westbrook's been terrific. I just think the way their offense is played, Baker Mayfield's already committed to come back next season. This team, I think, felt a little bit probably hard done by because they were written off so early. Houston wasn't that bad of a loss, and Ohio State's in the Final Four. This is a strong team, not as strong as what they thought that we were going to be coming into the season, but still a team that's going to close out with a victory over Auburn in my mind. Now we look at the Orange Bowl. It's Florida State against Michigan. You could make the case that Michigan is the second best team in the country, honestly. They get left out, though, due to the fact that they lost to Ohio State and they blew one at Iowa. That's really what did them in. Are they going to come out and really look to take it out on Florida State?
Well, whenever you have the man leading the helm there in Jim Harbaugh, I think obviously he's going to want some revenge in this game. But on the other hand, Florida State's also playing for revenge. Last season, very disappointing conclusion to their season with losing their bowl game to Houston. And I think that's one of those things that really solidified Houston, put them on the college football map. But this is a game where DeAndre Francois has been tremendous for FSU. I think next year you look for him to be an early Heisman candidate. That's how good I think he could be. But right now, what this comes down to is defense. And there's no doubt in our minds that behind Alabama, there is not a defense better than Michigan. And DeAndre Francois has been on the ground a lot this year. This might not be a pretty game for him. I have Michigan winning it.
I love Michigan here. Last year, they obviously didn't make it to the Final Four. There wasn't much of a case for them. But their final regular season game was an absolute blowout at the hands of Ohio State. Well, in their bowl game, if I'm not mistaken, they played Florida, and they demolished them. They now get Florida State. I think it might look very similar. Michigan is going to play for a purpose. And I think that is the most important thing in bowl games is what is your purpose? What is the message you're trying to send? Jim Harbaugh wants to be mentioned with Nick Saban and Urban Meyer as the best coach in college football. He can make a legit case for that. He's going to have to dominate in bowl games. He did that in year 1. I think he'll do it in year 2. The Citrus Bowl now we move on to. This is my favorite game by far. I don't even care at the college football playoffs. Ed Orgeron and Lamar Jackson, the beauty of this game, it just gets me so excited. Who do you think comes out with a victory?
Well, look, I mean, everybody in the country fell in love with Louisville very early, and then late in the season, I think Louisville showed their true colors as they just lost game after game. And look, I think Ed Orgeron, he's the man at LSU now. Kevin Walsh and in his fan club, they got what they want. He's the man in charge there, and I think he catapults them to a win. He brings just this uncontainable energy, and while Lamar Jackson is fantastic, has a tremendous skill set, he's going up against LSU. He struggled against Louisville. He lost against Kentucky, who's definitely not one of the cream of the crops in the SEC. So if that's where you've had your troubles, there's no way you're beating LSU and the man of the hour, Ed Orgeron.
There's a lot of interesting storylines here. Ed Orgeron, the opportunity to now coach this team to a bowl game victory and really say, like, hey, LSU is going to bring back another power to the SEC. Because right now I really think they are lacking behind Alabama. Also, it could be a Leonard Fournette send-off game. We all know he's going to the NFL next season. So what type of send-off could we get from him? On the other side, though, for a long time, Louisville looked like they had a very strong chance to be that 4th spot and go up against Alabama eventually. You were really on the side of they stood no chance. There's no way Lamar Jackson would have found success. I stood on the optimistic side of things because Lamar Jackson was so impressive to me throughout the majority of this season that, well, maybe he could. This is now his test. LSU, they showed in that game against Alabama. They have as good a defense as anyone in this country. What will Lamar Jackson be able to do? I think he's going to have a great game. I just think that Leonard Fournette will have a better one, and that's why I have LSU coming out with the victory in the Citrus Bowl. We close it off with the Cotton Bowl. It's Western Michigan, their unbeaten season team that came out of nowhere on the line up against Wisconsin, whose 3 biggest accomplishments are almost beating Ohio State, almost beating Michigan, and almost beating Penn State. Boy, did you guys try. Will they, shucks, almost do it again against Western Michigan, or do they get a win?
This reminds me a lot of a game from a couple of years ago where TCU with Andy Dalton was still kind of coming into their own, trying to gain the respect of the college football world. Gary Patterson was still there, and we had historically known him as an offensive guy. Well, he started to turn that program into an offensive one with Andy Dalton, who's gone on to do some nice things in the NFL. Still can't win playoff games, but has done some nice things in the NFL. But I think when you look at this game, it is very eerily similar to that game there. I have Western Michigan winning this game. I have been on the Wisconsin side a lot this year. I think they're a very good football team. But Western Michigan just reminds me of that fire I saw in that TCU team, who ironically enough played Wisconsin and won their bowl game to kind of gain the credibility and the respect of the college football universe. Western Michigan might not be in the same category as a lot of these top-tier programs, but I do think that they'll earn the respect of a lot of people and win their bowl game.
I'm going to take the leap with you, buddy. Let's go for it. I like Western Michigan here. They're just an exciting team, and it just goes along the line of what is your purpose? They have a lot to prove here. They're an unbeaten team that's in the top 25 and not even a single bit of consideration for a Final Four spot. Of course not, people would say to you. Well, if they get a win here, coming into next year, people can say, do we really have to start considering this group? I think you're going to have to. I think they get this win up against Wisconsin, and it's really going to elevate their program to another level. The closing thing for us here is going to be, should they expand the college football playoffs? You look at Penn State and Michigan, I think the 2 biggest losers in regards to, we should have been there, and they make really strong cases. When you look at it, is it 6 teams, is it 8 teams, is it I don't care, just get me more teams, or is 4 the right amount?
Well, I think it's one of those things where I understand all the arguments for expanding. I know you're one person who's always been in favor of expansion, and I think the arguments are very, very considerate. But to me, the committee's question to them is always give me the best 4 teams. And I think undeniably these past 3 years, they have given us the best 4 teams. Maybe there's been a 5 in there who we could have made an argument for, but I think largely expansion would just kind of oversaturate it to a point. I'm okay with you not getting a 2-loss Wisconsin team in there or a 3-loss USC team in there. I think it makes it so interesting, and it really does make those games in September, every game matters so much more because one misstep could ruin everything. And we saw last season, Ohio State, I think we all still agree, was probably the best team in college football. Ezekiel Elliott, who's done tremendous things in the NFL this year. Joey Bosa has been fantastic. So many NFL playmakers on that team, but they didn't even make it into the college football playoff. Timing means a lot. Losing one game means everything. And I think you could eliminate that with expansion, but to me, I just don't want to oversaturate things. And I think the question to the committee has been, give me the 4 best teams. We have gotten the 4 best teams, and right now, I'm very happy with the system that we have.
Look, to me, it's an improvement from what we once had, which was just 2 teams. But I will sacrifice the importance of Week 2 and Week 3 games for better playoff games. Ultimately, last year, we didn't get the best 4 teams. Ohio State was not only one of the best 4, they were the best team in the country. They would have won back-to-back national championships had they gotten in there, and they were left out because of the time that they lost. That is the other problem, because the margin for error is so small now. When you're Oklahoma and you lose Week 2 to Texas, who is trash, you can get in, but you lose, if you're in Ohio State shoes, in one of the final weeks to a Michigan State team that was in the college football playoffs, but it's late in the season, you miss out. And that's why I think you need to expand, because it's now been year 1, TCU missed out, and they had a legit chance at actually winning that title. They proved that by beating that Ole Miss team that beat Bama that season, Ohio State last year. And then this year, I think Michigan and Penn State are the 2 teams that'll make a similar case. I just propose this simple idea, and 8 teams is a lot, it is. But if you had this format, 1 versus 8, USC against Alabama, we've seen it before, and yes, Bama would likely destroy them. But USC is much better than what they were in the first week of the season, and Bama would probably kill anyone the way they're playing this year, so you kind of scrap that. Then you could get Washington versus Oklahoma, an offensive dream matchup, in my opinion at least. I'd love to see that. Then you're presented with Ohio State-Michigan rematch. I'm all in on that. And then a 4-5 that looks like Clemson against Penn State. You now have 8 games, or not 8 games, 4 games, 3 if you don't count the USC-Alabama game that I'm all the way in on. It also takes off the massive layoff we have from the committee selecting to when we finally play these games. It's not going to be till New Year's. We have to wait a whole year to finally get to see them play. I understand your point, and it is a very good one. It becomes oversaturation. Now, when a team loses in Week 1, it's like, nah, they'll bounce back. And I get that, and I totally get that. But the team that loses in Week 10 shouldn't be like, oh, our world's fallen down, even if they've lost to a superior team. It's an interesting argument to be made. Also, is maybe 6 teams enough with 2 byes? How do you decide who gets in then? Also, are you going to have automatic bids for the Power 5 conferences? It may force the hand of a team like Notre Dame to really join maybe an ACC. There's a lot that goes into it, but for me, again, it's now 3 for 3 in my opinion, where they probably left out one of the 4 best teams. And it'll be interesting to see if we ever get that change. But the next time we'll be back, we're going to break down for you the championship game. Likely to be Alabama. Is it going to be Ohio State or Clemson? Or is Washington going to pull the upset of the year? We'll have all that covered on the next episode. It'll be a little bit now. I'll make sure I cut the hair up a bit and shave the beard for that one as we get back on College Football Corner. Jersey Joe Archino, Kevin Walsh. We'll see you guys next time.